Hey there, Games Apprentice back with another Evercade video. This week I'm going to be reviewing the Indie Heroes Collection 1. Is the person who curated this a hero, or are they a money-pinching villain? Let's find out. Independent developers around the world are making some of the most creative, innovative and exciting games that are available to play today. One of our ambitions for the Evercade was to put together a collection of indie titles showcasing the talents of developers and celebrating their games. The designers, coders and composers are often tiny teams with small budgets, but their big dreams make these games possible. This collection brings together platformers, story-driven horrors and puzzle games, all retro-themed or inspired. Now it's cool to see an indie collection of games that I've never heard of before, and so many of them. Here they are ranked from worst to best. Coming last on the list, this one a side-scrolling shooter, and it's surely the worst scrolling shooter on the Evercade. This one feels like the sort of game I'd have made when I was 8 years old playing around with some video game maker software. Its main issue beyond what you can see are that the gun doesn't fire very far and the ship movement just feels really off. When you beat, I guess, a mini-boss, the screen has to move, pulling you with it. If you happen to not be in the right exact place, you just instantly get pulled into a wall. I didn't enjoy this one at all. Next up is Ploid. This one does a great job of increasing your expectations too much early on. The pre-game intro looks and sounds good, giving you Mega Man vibes, but then the game starts and you're this little fat kid with a giant head who walks and jumps weird. You can shoot, but your gun has no sound effects, which feels odd. Enemies seem way too difficult for how early in the game it is, and when you die, you've got to start over. With how dull and clunky the traversal mechanics are, this is just painful. I was initially going to be really harsh with this one. I know it was made by a 7-year-old kid, but at the end of the day this is an X Factor and people are paying money for this collection. Then I played the previous two games on the list and realised it could be much worse. Cuba III is an adventure game where you need to obtain 4 gems from various levels. The overworld works sort of like Legend of Zelda with the top-down view, whereas the levels are side-on. The level variety is pretty impressive and makes you want to see more of the game, and it's something I'm always a fan of in retro games as it feels like you're getting your money's worth. The underwater level certainly has Ninja Turtles vibes with its murderous reddy pink scenery. Sure, it doesn't look like much, but the music and sound effects are decent and the gameplay is fun, if a bit basic. I was expecting a Wario Land clone when I saw the controls and character design for this one. I wish people would stop raising my expectations with this kind of design. Suffice to say, I was bitterly disappointed. This one is basically a puzzle platformer where you need to push blocks and break stuff with your head to progress. Its biggest issue is that everything about its design is basically trying to screw you over, from its control scheme to its level design. Most levels are designed for you to make a mistake, getting you stuck and forcing you to kill yourself and start over. But other than blind luck, there's no way not to make these mistakes. You can't zoom out to work out where to go next. You can only do so by exploring it and hoping for the best. This might lead to you standing on a vital block that crumbles when you touch it, or jumping blindly off a ledge, finding out you can't get back up. This would be fine if you didn't have lives, but you only start with a measly 2, forcing you to repeat the early levels over and over. I don't mind indie games that don't look great or where the mechanics aren't quite on point, but awful level design like this is just unacceptable in this day and age. The sequel to Alien Cat 1, I guess? Like every other game on this collection though, not something I'd heard of. Alien Cat is a top-down puzzle maze game. You need to move the alien cat around the maze, picking up keys and opening up the portal, and avoiding obstacles along the way. What starts off simple gets more complicated when an extra cat is added, giving you 2 to control at once. It's hardly original, with one of the most famous occurrences of this being in Mario 3D World. Personally, I didn't enjoy this game at all. Slow puzzle maze games just bore me generally. it is what it is. I don't really have any complaints about it, beyond it maybe needing a more unique mechanic to stand out a bit, but if you like these sorts of games, maybe you like this one. Next up, we've got a dungeon crawler in the form of Anguna. This is clearly a Legend of Zelda clone. If you're going to make a game like Legend of Zelda, you're instantly going to draw comparisons. First off, the music is really annoying and repetitive. It lacks sound effects in some areas, which is odd, for example the giant alligator battle. And the enemies are really dull, slimes and bats and a weird green man who attacks you by just walking forward fast, with his arms down by his side. It's not a particularly pretty game either. The dungeon has some nice detail, but inside and outside the dungeon, it's all a bit bland and generic. Again, it's another one that needs its own thing. It's not a bad game, it's just what's the point of playing a game that's like Zelda but worse in every possible way? It's just missing its own hook, mechanic or identity. And I know I've mentioned it already, but the music is really annoying. Going forward in this list, everything from now on I really enjoyed playing. Starting with this NES style platformer. It's cute, everything about it feels authentic. You can jump and shoot your little fireball. The sound effects and music both fit the era, and the music isn't exactly catchy or anything though, and can be a bit grating as it tries a bit too hard with some of its random high-pitched chiptune notes. The first world is probably the worst looking world. I can see why they went with it, because it replicates stuff like Green Hill Zone, but with the difficulty, a lot of people probably won't see past it to see some of the cooler level designs that went into the later levels. It's a fun little platformer though, it's mechanically sound and worth checking out. It makes obvious sense that this game is on this collection, being that it features numerous characters from other games on here battling it out. The gameplay is a lot like Towerfall or Duck Game. You have to jump on your opponent's head or use one of the random item boxes to kill them. The constant jump sound effect is pretty annoying, but it does have a satisfying conclusion when you land on your opponent's head with a thud. Clearly, this one is aimed at multiplayer, although by the size of the levels, I think 4-player will be a bit too chaotic for this one. 2 or 3 is probably the sweet spot. The small level size definitely holds it back from being better than what it is. Still, it controls well, and these sorts of games are always fun and competitive with a friend, so I'd recommend checking it out. I'll be going more into depth with this one in a future multiplayer Evercade video. I do like a good runner game, and Chainbreak is a fun little one. If you've never played a runner game before, you'll have experienced aspects of them in other games. The screen's always moving, as is your character. In this one, you can freely move around within the moving screen as well as jump. The perspective is a bit weird as it's not quite side on, meaning that it doesn't quite control how you'd like, but it's fine once you get used to it. The jump animation could do with being a bit higher. It's really difficult to tell how high off the ground you are. You get a shadow on the floor, but it's not helpful when that shadow is over a dark pit. Still, this one's a fun game that's really easy to pick up and play and suits handheld gaming perfectly well. I always like a double jump mechanic in a platformer, and Foxyland doesn't disappoint. In this one, you play a cute little fox that needs to pick up all the gems to open the exit to the level. There's also other collectibles to pick up along the way. It's fast with some solid platforming action. The music's cool, although it does begin to grate after a few levels, but it's a nice looking game with that Amiga platforming aesthetic, but cleaned up a bit. Levels are pretty short, which again, perfect for handheld gaming. If Chainbreak is a runner game, then Flee is a jumper game. In Flee, your character can't stop jumping. You can move left and right, and you can mash one of the buttons to make Flee's jump a bit lower, but it constantly jumps. Flee navigates through short levels, avoiding spikes, pits and enemies, collecting jars of blood. Every 5 levels you can convert those jars of blood into lives. It's a fun little platformer that has a Super Meat Boy vibe, but without being anywhere near as punishing. It doesn't look like much, I'm not sure if the constant jumping made it better than it would have been with a normal jump, but it's nice to see something a little different that made this one memorable. In Doodle World you play, I guess, a doodle, and must battle through the levels heavily inspired by Mario. They all look like they're a child's notepad scrolling. It's got a lot of charm, but that would be nothing without some solid gameplay, which it certainly has. The platform is fast, difficult and satisfying. If the difficulty is too much for you, there's the embarrassingly named Kids mode, although I'm sure most of you remember being a lot better at video games as a kid than you are now, so maybe it should be called Oldies mode. This is a solid platformer, and I definitely recommend checking this one out. This one was almost my gem of the week. What do you get if you cross Pokemon with a gritty cop show? You get quest arrest, of course. You play a rookie detective and have to go around town solving crime and arresting criminals. You do this by speaking to people, finding clues and smacking perps about. You can either play as a good cop or a bad cop, and the townsfolk will react differently depending on what you chose. Fate will stop a guy jumping off a bridge and you'll never hear the end of it. The other aspect of the gameplay are the battles. You need to take down gang members in the city, and these are clearly heavily inspired by Pokemon. You've got 3 different attacks that do different damage, and then the arrest option. If you lower the health enough, you'll get a successful arrest quick time event, and if you complete that, you'll arrest the criminal. Fail and you'll end up killing them, or getting yourself killed. It's a fun little game with amusing dialogue filled with F-bombs galore. Its biggest letdown are that it's quite buggy, and after the first battle you'll realise they're all basically the same. It's also only about an hour long. Still, it's a fun hour and just something that feels really different. My Evercade gem of the week goes to Deadius. You're a little kid who keeps having nightmares and you've only got 3 days until the world ends. It's not a time loop game like Majora's Mask or anything, but it does have multiple endings depending what choices you make. First off, it looks great, like Zelda or Pokemon Game Boy games, and the music throughout does a great job at creating atmosphere and tension. The gameplay basically consists of a bunch of fetch quests. You'll find an item and then find a place to use said item on one of the days of the week. These fetch quests will determine which ending you get. The town is pretty small and hardly densely populated, so you can see an ending within about an hour. Several of the endings are pretty shocking, and it's made all the more disturbing by its cutesy Game Boy art style. As there's not much to the gameplay, you probably could just watch this one on YouTube or something, but there's something extra eerie about playing it on a handheld in the dark with headphones on. Check it out. The Indie Heroes Collection 1 is a solid collection of unheard of games. With only a few duds, there's a lot to like about it. It's full of style and charm, and it's a well curated collection with a lot of variety, so there's something there for everyone in all the different genres. It comes with a little sticker set, which is a nice touch, and also a manual with information about all the different developers, as well as pictures humanising them, which makes you feel bad when you've been publicly slagging them off on your YouTube channel. It's missing any amazing games though, which is holding it back slightly, but overall it's still a very good collection, and that's why I'm going to score this one an 8.5 out of 10. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video, and do click subscribe so you don't miss out on future Evercade videos. I'll catch you next time.